enter the enchanting world of Princess Blondine, where magic and danger intertwine as she faces betrayal from those she should trust most. When her loving father, King Benin, unknowingly chooses a cunning new queen, Blondine finds herself trapped in a spellbinding forest teeming with secrets and peril. As she battles the darkness that threatens to consume her and longs to reunite with her father, discover a tale rich in adventure, heartache, and the quest for redemption that will captivate your imagination and tug at your heartstrings. In the 15th century, the Kingdom of Benin stood as one of the most powerful and prosperous empires in West Africa. Located in what is now southern Nigeria, Benin was renowned for its advanced governance, skilled artisans, and powerful military. Its capital, Benin City, was a marvel of architecture, surrounded by vast walls and moats, with intricate craftsmanship seen in the famous Benin bronzes that told stories of the kingdom's glory and history. At this time, the people of Benin lived in a world where tradition and mysticism intertwined with daily life. The kingdom was ruled by a mighty king, the Oba, whose word was law and whose influence extended far beyond the borders of his city. It was an era marked by both immense wealth and the rich cultural heritage of the Benin people. The lush forests, rivers, and vibrant marketplaces were the backdrop to a society that flourished through trade, art, and military prowess. In the heart of this kingdom, there was born a girl who would become known as Blondine. Her fair skin and pale hair were a rare sight in the land, for Blondine was an albino, an anomaly in a community where most shared the deep, rich hues of the earth. Her striking appearance earned her the name Blondine, a reflection of her unique beauty in a world where her traits set her apart. But it was not only her appearance that made her story extraordinary, it was the destiny that awaited her, woven with magic, sacrifice, and a journey of transformation that would touch the lives of many. Blondine, Bonne-Biche, and Beau-Minon, in the golden age of the kingdom of Benin-Beaujour, ruled the noble King Benin Oba, a monarch whose virtues were sung by poets and whose wisdom was extolled in the annals of time. His justice was unwavering, his kindness unparalleled, and his subjects revered him as a protector of peace and prosperity. By his side had once reigned the gentle Queen Doucette, a beacon of grace and love, and together they brought into the world a daughter of remarkable beauty and charm, the Princess Blondine, and her laughter carried the joy of an innocent heart. But happiness, even in the most blessed of realms, is fleeting. Queen Doucette, frail of health, succumbed to an untimely death shortly after Blondine's birth. The loss left the king bereft, his heart heavy with sorrow. In the stillness of the nights, he would retreat to the gardens where Doucette once walked, her memory haunting the roses she loved. Yet in the daytime, he found solace in his daughter, whose giggles and playful innocence offered a glimmer of hope amidst his grief. Blondine grew under the king's watchful eye, a child of radiant spirit and tender heart. She thrived in a world of joy, lavished with tokens of her father's love, jewels that sparkled like the heavens, bonbons sweeter than nectar, and fruits so rare they seemed plucked from the trees of paradise. The bond between father and daughter was unbreakable. Yet the kingdom of Benin-Beaujour had its traditions, and the whispers of courtly duty began to murmur in the halls. The ministers, noblemen, and citizens alike pressed upon the king the need for a son, a prince to inherit the throne. At first, King Benin resisted their entreaties, his heart unwilling to entertain the idea of another by his side. But the clamor grew, a tide he could not stem. Finally, with a reluctant sigh, he summoned his trusted minister, Leger. "My loyal Leger," said the king, his voice heavy with weariness, "my people demand what I cannot bear to seek, a new queen. Yet my heart remains chained to Doucette, and I cannot search for another. I entrust this burden to you, my friend. Seek out a princess who will not only sit upon the throne, but bring happiness to my Blondine. Only when you find one who is truly perfect shall I wed." With a solemn nod, Leisure took his leave, carrying the king's hopes on his shoulders. His journey led him across kingdoms vast and varied, yet no princess seemed worthy. Many were found, but they were twisted of spirit, unkind of heart, or lacking in grace. It seemed an impossible quest, until Leisure reached the court of King Turbulent. Here he encountered Princess Fourbette, a woman of striking beauty, whose smiles were dazzling and whose charms seemed boundless. Her laughter filled the halls, and her manner appeared so gentle that Leisure believed he had found the one. Little did he suspect the shadow within her heart, for Fourbette was proud, envious, and cunning. Her radiance masked a nature as treacherous as an adder's bite. King Turbulent, long burdened by his daughter's presence, leapt at the opportunity to be rid of her. Her scheming ways and jealous temperament had disrupted his court, interfering with his hunts and his revelries. Without hesitation, he granted Leisure's request and sent Fourbette to Beaujour, cloaked in finery and false sweetness. When the entourage arrived at King Benin's court, the people rejoiced at the sight of their new queen-to-be. Fourbette's beauty and polished demeanor charmed all who beheld her. Yet Blondine, with the unerring instinct of a child, felt a prickle of unease. She clung to her father. She whispered, "Papa, I do not like her." Benin, blinded by hope and swayed by Leisure's assurances, dismissed his daughter's fears with a gentle smile. "She will be kind to you, my treasure," he said, stroking her hair. "Do not worry." Thus began a tale that would test the bonds of love, loyalty, and courage. A tale that would plunge Princess Blondine into trials of the heart and soul, as her father's choice ushered a shadow into the kingdom of Beaujour. The procession of Princess Fourbette's arrival was a spectacle to behold. 4,000 mules trudged through the countryside, their burdens heavy with treasures, glistening jewels, and silken gowns that shone like the morning sun. Couriers had ridden ahead to announce the approach of the new queen, and King Benin, though uneasy, rode out to greet her. When he first laid eyes on Fourbette, her beauty struck him, a beauty as cold and flawless, but in her sharp, calculating gaze, there was none of the gentle warmth that had graced the eyes of his beloved Doucette. Still, he resolved to fulfill his duty for the sake of his people. The moment Fourbette's piercing eyes landed on Blondine, now 3 years old, her expression twisted briefly, like a shadow passing over the moon. In that fleeting moment, hatred and cruelty blazed in her gaze. Blondine recoiled, trembling, and began to cry, her sobs echoing like a lament through the air. The king knelt beside his daughter, his brow furrowing with concern. "What is the matter? Why does my sweet and sensible Blondine weep like this?" Blondine flung herself into his arms, clinging to him as if for dear life. "Papa, dear Papa," she cried, "do not leave me with her. I am afraid. Her eyes are cruel." Benin's heart tightened at his daughter's words. He turned sharply to Fourbette, and in her face caught the faint traces of malice before she could conceal them. His chest grew heavy with foreboding. Resolving to protect his daughter, he decreed that Blondine should remain in the care of her devoted nurse, far from the queen's reach. Fourbette's smile never faltered, but within her heart hatred for Blondine took root. Though she rarely saw the child, her loathing only deepened. The nurse's loving watchfulness shielded Blondine from the queen's wrath, and Fourbette dared not defy the king's commands. For all his kindness, Benin was known for his swift and severe punishment of disobedience. A year passed, and Fourbette bore a daughter of her own. The child, named Brunette for her dark raven-black hair, inherited her mother's cunning and cruelty. Though young, Brunette delighted in tormenting her gentle half-sister. She bit, pinched, and yanked Blondine's curls. She shattered her toys, tore her dresses, and left trails of mischief wherever she went. Blondine endured it all without anger, her tender heart quick to forgive. "Oh, Papa," Blondine would say, her soft voice earnest, "do not scold Brunette. She is so little. She does not know she grieves me. When she bites or pinches me, it is only in play." Benny, though touched by his eldest daughter's generosity, saw through Brunette's antics. The difference between his daughters could not have been starker. Blondine's sweetness made her all the dearer to him, and this only stoked the flames of jealousy in Fourbette's heart. If not for her fear of the king, she would have made Blondine's life a waking nightmare. By the time Blondine turned 7 and Brunette 3, the tension within the palace had grown unbearable. Yet Blondine's days still held moments of joy. The king gifted her a carriage drawn by majestic ostriches, their feathers as soft as clouds. Guiding them was her young coachman, Gourmandinet, who had been her childhood playmate. Though devoted to Blondine, Gourmandinet harbored a fatal flaw, his insatiable greed for sweets. "I love you dearly, Gourmandinet," Blondine would say as she gently rebuked him, "but I do not love to see you so greedy. Please, try to change this wicked habit. It will only bring you trouble." He would bow his head and promise to reform, but temptation always triumphed. Cakes, candies, and bonbons lured him into mischief, earning him scoldings and even beatings from the palace staff. Fourbette, ever watchful, saw an opportunity to exploit Gourmandinet's weakness. Blondine's favorite pastime was riding her carriage through the garden, a sprawling haven of flowers and fountains bordered by a magnificent forest called the Forest of Lilacs. Its endless lilac blooms exhaled a heady, intoxicating fragrance, enchanting all who approached. But the forest was shrouded in dread, for it was said to be enchanted. Any who entered its depths vanished, never to return. Gourmandinet had been strictly forbidden to drive Blondine near the forest, and the king himself had tried to bar access. Yet every wall or barrier he built was mysteriously dismantled, the stones disappearing as if by magic. The grating remained the only line between the garden and the forest, a fragile boundary between safety and doom. Unbeknownst to Blondine, Fourbette set her plan in motion. With the promise of a sack of rare bonbons, she whispered dark temptations into Gourmandinet's ear, coaxing him toward betrayal. In the days to come, the innocent Blondine would unknowingly step closer to the fateful moment that would change her life forever. The Queen Fourbette's plan unfolded with all the slow, deliberate malice of a predator stalking its prey. Day by day she lavished the young coachman Gourmandinet with delicacies, jellies that shimmered like jewels, bonbons that melted into sweetness, and cakes as light as whispers. Each gift deepened his dependency until he was entirely enslaved by his own gluttony. It was then, with cruel precision, that she summoned him to her chamber. Gourmandinet entered nervously, his cap twisting in his hands. The queen sat poised like a spider in her web, her gaze fixed on him with an intensity that made his knees weak. "Gourmandinet," she began, her voice like honeyed steel, "it depends entirely upon you whether you shall feast upon sweets for the rest of your life or never taste a single one again." His eyes widened in horror. "Never again eat one? Oh, madam, I should die of such punishment. Speak, madam, what must I do to escape this terrible fate?" Fourbette's lips curled into a thin smile. "It is quite simple. You must drive the Princess Blondine near the Forest of Lilacs." Gourmandinet recoiled. "I cannot do it, madam. The king has forbidden it." "Ah, you cannot." Her tone hardened as she rose, her shadow looming over him. "Then no more dainties for you. I shall command everyone in the palace to deny you even a crumb." Tears welled in his eyes. "Oh, madam, do not be so cruel. Give me any order that does not betray the king's trust." The queen's gaze bored into him, her words cutting like a blade. "I can only repeat. Take Blondine to the Forest of Lilacs. Encourage her to step beyond the grating to gather the flowers there. Do this, and you shall have an endless supply of the sweets you crave. But, madam, he stammered, his face as pale as ash, if the princess enters the forest, she will never return. You know the curse that binds the enchanted ground. To send her there is to condemn her to death. For the third and final time, Fourbette said, her voice low and dangerous, I ask you, will you obey me? Choose now. An immense chest of bonbons, renewed each month, or a lifetime without the pleasures you love. But what of the king's wrath? He whispered, trembling. He will surely punish me. The queen waved her hand dismissively. I will protect you. Once Blondine is gone, I will send you away with your reward. Your future will be secure. Tears spilled down Gourmandinet's cheeks. Have pity, madam. Do not force me to betray her. She has always been kind to me. Fourbette's expression darkened. Still you hesitate, you sniveling coward. What is Blondine's fate to you? Once you obey, you will be placed in my daughter Brunette's service. I swear you shall never want for sweets again. His resistance wavered. The promise of endless indulgence warred against the guilt festering in his heart. At last, his gluttony triumphed. That night, as he lay in his bed, his pillow damp with bitter tears, he tried to console himself. Perhaps, he thought, he could one day rescue Blondine. Perhaps a powerful fairy could undo the harm he was about to commit. The next morning, Blondine, radiant in her innocence, climbed into her carriage. Let us ride through the garden, she said, her golden hair catching the morning light. She kissed her father goodbye and promised to return in 2 hours. Gourmandinet guided the ostriches, his heart heavy with shame. At first he steered them away from the forest, but as soon as they were out of sight of the palace, he changed direction. The towering lilac trees came into view, their blossoms perfuming the air with an intoxicating sweetness. He said nothing, his silence a heavy weight between them. What is the matter, Gourmandinet? Blondine asked, her voice soft with concern. You are so quiet. Are you unwell? No, my princess, he muttered. Tell me what troubles you, and I will do everything in my power to help. Her kindness was a knife to his already bleeding conscience. For a moment, he nearly confessed. But then the vision of the queen's promised bonbons rose before him, and he pushed his remorse aside. Before he could reply, they reached the grating. Blondine's eyes lit up at the sight of the lilacs. Oh, how beautiful! How fragrant! I must have a bouquet for my dear papa. Gourmandinet, fetch me some of those lovely flowers. I cannot leave my seat, princess, he said, his voice trembling. The ostriches might run off if I do. Then I will guide them myself, she said. The king would be angry with me for leaving you alone. It is best that you gather the flowers yourself. Blondine nodded. You are right. I would not want you to be scolded. With a bright smile, she sprang from the carriage, slipped through the bars of the grating, and began to gather the blossoms. As soon as her feet touched the enchanted ground, a terrible stillness fell over the forest. Gourmandinet's heart seized with dread. Princess! He cried, but though she was mere steps away, she did not hear him. The lilacs seemed to close in around her, their blooms a curtain of violet and white. Within moments she was gone. For hours, Gourmandinet sat by the grating, weeping bitterly. When at last he returned to the palace, he went straight to the queen. She greeted him with a cruel smile. Is it done? She asked. He nodded, too stricken to speak. Good, she said. She gestured to a large chest brimming with bonbons. Here is your reward. As a valet loaded the chest onto a mule, she handed Gourmandinet a purse of gold. Go, she said, return in a month, and you shall have more. But Gourmandinet felt no joy as he departed. The sweets weighed heavy in his arms, like the burden of his guilt. Gourmandinet set off with the chest of bonbons, riding atop the mule in a silence as heavy as the weight on his heart. The road was uneven, winding through a landscape shrouded in mist, and the mule, stubborn and willful, soon began to resist. Its hooves struck the stones with sharp clacks as it tossed its head and snorted, agitated by the burden of its load. The chest, filled with the queen's promise of sweets, was an unwieldy weight, and the mule's patience quickly frayed. The beast reared and kicked, its powerful legs bucking wildly. Gourmandinet, inexperienced and unsteady in the saddle, gripped the reins, and the mule's defiance grew fiercer, and in one final violent motion it threw him from its back. He tumbled to the ground, the chest toppling with him, its golden latch gleaming in the dim light before it burst open, spilling its precious contents onto the dirt. Gourmandinet's fall was heavy, his head striking a jagged stone. The impact was swift and merciless. His body lay still, lifeless among the scattered bonbons that had lured him to betrayal. The sweets glistened mockingly in the pale daylight, untouched and uneaten. Thus Gourmandinet reaped no reward from his treachery, not even the taste of the treasures for which he had sold his soul. In the end, no one mourned his passing. Only the Princess Blondine, who had once shown him kindness, would have grieved, but she was lost, far beyond the reach of his remorse. Blondine, unaware of the tragedy unfolding behind her, wandered deeper into the Forest of Lilacs. The air was perfumed with their intoxicating fragrance, and their delicate blooms swayed gently in the soft breeze. She marveled at their beauty, each cluster of blossoms more vibrant than the last. Her apron and hat brimmed with lilacs, but each time she thought she had enough, she spied another branch even lovelier than those she had already gathered. Again and again she emptied her collection to start anew. For an hour she was consumed by the task, her childlike delight undimmed by the oppressive stillness of the forest. But as the sun climbed higher, she began to feel the heat pressing down upon her. Her limbs grew weary, and the lilac branches seemed heavier with each step. She paused, realizing at last that she had wandered far beyond where she had intended. Blondine turned in search of the path back to the carriage. She called out for Gourmandinet, her voice ringing through the forest like a bell. There was no reply, only the rustling of leaves in the breeze. A pang of unease gripped her. "I have wandered too far," she said softly, trying to steady her nerves. "I must return at once, though I am so very tired. Gourmandinet will hear me. He will come to find me." She walked briskly, her arms laden with lilacs, but the further she went, the more unfamiliar the surroundings became. The forest seemed endless, an impenetrable maze of blossoms and shadows. Panic began to set in. She called for Gourmandinet again and again, her voice trembling with desperation, but the silence that followed was deafening. "What will become of me?" she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "I am all alone in this vast forest. My poor papa, what will he think when I do not return? And Gourmandinet, what will he do? He will be scolded, perhaps even beaten. This is all my fault. I should never have left the carriage." Her sobs broke the stillness as she sank to the ground, exhausted and afraid. "Unfortunate girl that I am, I shall die of hunger and thirst here if the wolves do not find me first." She wept for what felt like an eternity, her tears soaking the soft moss beneath her. At last her exhaustion overtook her grief, and she rested her golden head upon the lilacs she had gathered. The scent of the blossoms enveloped her as she drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep. When Blondine awoke, the sun was high in the sky, its warm rays filtering through the canopy above. She rubbed her eyes, confused by her surroundings. The familiar walls of her palace bedroom were gone, replaced by the towering trees of the forest. The events of the previous day came rushing back, and fear gripped her once more. "Nurse!" she called out, but the only answer was a soft, plaintive meow. Startled, she looked down and saw a magnificent white cat sitting at her feet, its fur as pure as freshly fallen snow. Its large, intelligent eyes gazed at her with an expression of gentle curiosity. "Ah, pretty cat!" she exclaimed, reaching out to stroke its silken fur. How beautiful you are. I am so happy to see you, for surely you can lead me to your home. I am so very hungry, and I cannot walk much further without food." The cat meowed again and extended a delicate paw, pointing toward a small bundle wrapped in fine white linen. Blondine reached for it and unfolded the cloth to find a simple meal of bread and butter. She ate eagerly, sharing the crumbs with the cat, who nibbled at them delicately. When their meal was finished, Blondine leaned down and stroked her new companion. "Thank you, pretty cat, for sharing your breakfast with me. Can you take me to my papa? He must be so worried about me." The cat, whom Blondine decided to call Beau-Minon, shook her head solemnly and mewed softly. Blondine's heart sank. "Ah, Beau-Minon, you understand me?" she said. "Please have pity on me. Lead me to some house where I might find shelter and rest, or I fear I shall perish here." Beau-Minon seemed to understand. She stood gracefully and walked a few steps before pausing to look back, as if beckoning Blondine to follow. With renewed hope, the princess rose and followed the cat. The way was not easy. Dense thickets blocked their path, but as Beau-Minon approached, the branches seemed to part of their own accord, forming a narrow passage. Blondine marveled at this strange magic, but there was no time to linger. Beau-Minon pressed onward, and Blondine followed, determined to keep up. As they walked, the forest grew lighter. The trees thinned, and the air became sweeter. Birds sang overhead, their melodies filling Blondine's heart with cautious joy. Squirrels darted playfully along the branches, and the ground was carpeted with vibrant flowers. For the first time since her ordeal began, Blondine felt a glimmer of hope. After an hour, they emerged from the forest into a sunlit clearing. Before them stood an elegant castle, its golden spires glinting in the sunlight. Blondine approached the gilded gate, her heart pounding with anticipation. But the gate was closed, and there was no bell to summon its inhabitants. She turned to thank Beau-Minon, but the cat was gone. Once again, Blondine was alone. Blondine watched as the great gate swung open silently before her, its gilded bars glinting in the soft golden light. She had not called, nor seen anyone approach, but the gate moved, as if by some unseen hand. Hesitant, she stepped into the courtyard beyond. The air seemed to shimmer with an ethereal calm, and yet there was no one to greet her. The castle before her was magnificent, its high spires reaching into the azure sky, its walls gleaming like polished ivory. The doors of the castle, vast and ornately carved, opened without a sound as she approached. Blondine's heart quickened, a strange mixture of awe and unease filling her chest. She entered the grand vestibule, her steps echoing faintly against the pristine white marble floors. Every door she passed seemed to anticipate her arrival, opening as she approached and closing gently behind her, as though the castle itself welcomed her. Room after room unveiled itself before her, each more splendid than the last. Rich tapestries adorned the walls, their intricate patterns woven with threads of gold and silver. Chandeliers of crystal sparkled above, casting rainbows of light across the polished floors. At last, she entered a salon furnished in blue and gold, the delicate colors blending harmoniously to create an air of tranquility. It was there, in the back of the room, that she saw them. Upon a bed of soft, fragrant grasses lay a white hind, her coat as pure and radiant as freshly fallen snow. Beside her stood the white cat, Beau-Minon, his intelligent eyes gleaming as he watched Blondine. The hind rose gracefully and approached, her movements elegant and measured. "You are most welcome, Blondine," the hind said, her voice gentle and melodic, carrying an almost maternal warmth. "My son, Beau-Minon, and I have awaited your arrival for a long time." Blondine gasped, her fear rising. How could they have known her name, her arrival? She instinctively stepped back, her hands trembling. "Take courage, princess," the hind continued softly. "You are among friends. I know the king, your father, well. I love him dearly, as I love you." Blondine's lip quivered, her voice breaking as she spoke. "Oh, madam, if you know my father, I beg you, take me to him. My absence must cause him unbearable sorrow." The hind's gentle expression turned sorrowful. "My dear Blondine," she said with a sigh, "it is beyond my power to take you to your father. You are in the domain of the magician of the Forest of Lilacs, whose power far surpasses my own. Yet do not despair. I can send dreams to your father, soft and comforting, to assure him of your safety and to ease his heart." Blondine's chest tightened with anguish. Tears welled in her eyes and spilled down her cheeks. "Shall I never see him again?" she cried, her voice trembling with despair. "My poor father, how I long for his embrace." "Do not lose hope, dear child," the hind said soothingly. "Wisdom and patience are always rewarded in time. You will see your father again, but not yet. For now, be brave and trust us. Beau-Minon and I will do all we can to make you happy." Though Blondine's heart ached, she sensed the sincerity in Bonne-Biche's words and resolved to control her grief. She wiped her tears, forcing a small smile. "I will try, madam," she said softly. "Your kindness deserves no less." Bonne-Biche inclined her head in approval and led Blondine through the castle. They climbed a spiraling staircase that opened into a room as splendid as a dream. The walls were draped in rose-colored silk, embroidered with gold. The furniture gleamed, upholstered in white velvet adorned with intricate patterns of animals and butterflies in vibrant threads. "This is your chamber," Bonne-Biche said, her voice warm. She led Blondine to an adjoining study, its walls covered in sky-blue damask embroidered with delicate pearls. The furniture was upholstered in silver moire studded with turquoise. On the walls hung two magnificent portraits, one of a strikingly handsome young man, the other of a woman of unparalleled beauty. Their regal attire spoke of nobility and grace. "Who are these?" Blondine asked, her curiosity piqued. Bonne-Biche hesitated, a shadow of sadness passing over her features. "I am forbidden to answer," she said. "You will know in time. But now come, dear child, it is time for dinner. You must be hungry." Blondine followed Bonne-Biche to the dining room, her hunger sharp after the day's trials. The sight that greeted her was peculiar yet enchanting. Bonne-Biche reclined on an enormous cushion of black satin, her place at the table set with a vase of fresh, fragrant herbs and a golden bucket of clear, cool water. Beside her sat Beau-Minon, perched on a small stool before a golden porringer filled with fried fish and tender game, alongside a crystal bowl of rich milk. Blondine's place was marked by a chair of carved ivory, upholstered in crimson velvet and studded with diamonds. Her plate, of intricately chased gold, was heaped with delicate soup and tender meats. A rock crystal goblet held fresh spring water, and a fine linen napkin lay beside her. Gazelles, nimble and graceful, attended the table, serving each course with remarkable precision. The meal was exquisite, and Blondine ate with gratitude, savoring each bite. When the feast concluded, Bonne-Biche and Beau-Minon led her into the garden. The air was sweet with the scent of blossoms, and the paths wound through orchards heavy with ripe fruit. Blondine marveled at the beauty surrounding her, her earlier sorrow momentarily forgotten. As the day waned, Bonne-Biche suggested she retire. Blondine agreed, her weariness returning with the setting sun. In her chamber, two gazelles awaited her, their movements graceful and precise as they helped her prepare for bed. They tucked her beneath soft silken covers and took their places by her bedside, their watchful presence a comfort. Though her body found rest, her mind lingered on thoughts of her father. Her silent tears slipped down her cheeks as she whispered his name into the darkness. At last, exhaustion overcame her, and she drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep. Blondine awoke with a start, her breath catching as though surfacing from a long, uncharted dream. She blinked, the golden sunlight streaming through the delicate silk curtains, casting warm patterns across the room. For a moment she lay still, her thoughts clouded by the haze of sleep, but something was different. She felt different. Rising, she noticed her limbs seemed longer, her body more poised. Her mind, too, buzzed with clarity, and strange memories swirled within her, of books she had read, melodies she had played, and words she had written, though she could not recall ever having done so. With an uneasy heart, she hurried to the mirror. What she saw took her breath away. The child she remembered was gone, replaced by a young woman of stunning beauty. Her eyes that sparkled with intelligence, her form exuded grace and elegance. She stared, astonished, at her reflection. Could this truly be her? Her pulse quickened as she dressed hastily, her hands trembling with confusion and excitement. Without hesitation, she left her chamber and made her way to the room where Bonne-Biche often resided. Finding the noble hind reclining gracefully on her bed of soft grasses, Blondine approached, her voice trembling with urgency. "Bonne-Biche, Bonne-Biche," she cried, "I entreat you, explain to me this strange transformation. Last night I went to bed a child, and now I awaken to find myself a young woman. Have I dreamed this? Is it an illusion? Or have I truly changed so much in a single night?" Bonne-Biche regarded her with a warm, knowing smile. "My dear Blondine," she said gently, "today you are 14 years old, but it has not been a single night. You have slept peacefully for 7 years. 7 years? Blondine echoed, her voice a whisper of disbelief. Yes, child. When you first came to this castle, you were but a little girl, unlearned and unprepared for the world. Beau-Minon and I wished to spare you the toil and trials of early learning. So I cast a spell of gentle slumber upon you. While your body rested, your mind was nurtured. We have spent these years instructing you in music, literature, art, and all the virtues of a cultivated heart and intellect. You awoke this morning fully formed, a young woman of beauty and wisdom." Blondine's wide eyes filled with wonder and doubt. "But how could this be? How could I have learned so much while I slept?" "Come, my dear, see for yourself," Bonne-Biche said, rising gracefully. She led Blondine to her study, the familiar room now seeming alive with new possibilities. Blondine hesitated for only a moment before sitting at the grand piano. Her fingers, guided by instinct, glided effortlessly over the keys, producing a melody so enchanting it brought tears to her own eyes. She turned to the harp, its strings resonating beneath her touch with a harmony that seemed to echo through her very soul. She sang, her voice clear and angelic, filling the air with a beauty that transcended words. Next she took up a brush and began to paint. The colors flowed onto the canvas as though they had been waiting within her all along, creating a scene of such vivid life it seemed almost to breathe. She wrote, her script elegant and refined, her words eloquent and profound. When at last she paused, she looked around at the books lining the walls. Each title felt familiar, the knowledge within them a part of her. Astonished and overjoyed, she turned to Bonne-Biche, her face radiant with gratitude. "Oh, my dear, kind friend," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "how can I ever repay you for what you have done for me? You have nurtured my mind and my heart, guided me through my childhood, and made me who I am. I owe you everything." Bonne-Biche nuzzled her affectionately, and Beau-Minon, who had joined them, brushed against her hand, purring softly. After a moment of shared happiness, Blondine's gaze dropped, and her voice grew hesitant. "Do not think me ungrateful, dear friends, if I ask one more thing of you. Tell me of my father. Does he still mourn my absence? Has he found peace? Or does he suffer still?" Bonne-Biche's eyes softened. "Your concern is natural, my sweet child, and it shall be eased. Look into this mirror, and you will see all that has passed since you left your father's side." Blondine turned to the enchanted mirror Bonne-Biche gestured toward. As the surface cleared, she saw her father's face. He paced restlessly, his expression troubled, and his movements agitated. The door opened, and Queen Fourbette entered, speaking quickly and with apparent distress. Blondine listened, her heart pounding, as the queen recounted the events of her disappearance. She spoke of the frightened ostriches, the overturned carriage, and the terrifying forest. She mentioned how Gourmandinet had been sent away, unable to cope with his grief. Blondine's father cried out in anguish, rushing toward the Forest of Lilacs, only to be restrained by his attendants. His despair was palpable, his cries for his beloved daughter echoing through the mirror's vision. At last, exhaustion overcame him, and he collapsed into a fitful sleep. The mirror shifted, showing Blondine's father again, but now he was older. His hair was white, his face lined with sorrow. He sat alone, clutching a small portrait of Blondine, his tears falling upon it as he pressed it to his lips. Blondine's tears flowed freely. "Oh, my poor father," she sobbed. "Why is he alone? What has become of the queen and of my sister Brunette?" Bonne-Biche's tone grew somber. "The queen showed little grief at your loss, and your father, seeing her true nature, sent her back to her father, King Turbulent. She perished there, consumed by her rage and bitterness. As for Brunette, her cruelty and envy only deepened. Your father gave her in marriage to Prince Violent, a man stern enough to reform her. She has begun to change, realizing that her wickedness prevents her happiness. In time, you may help her complete her transformation." Blondine's heart ached with longing. She yearned to see her father, to comfort him, to let him know she was alive and well. Yet she hesitated, unwilling to appear ungrateful to Bonne-Biche and Beau-Minon. She resolved to wait, to trust in her friends and in the destiny that awaited her. The days drifted by like a languid stream, unbroken in its course yet tinged with an undercurrent of melancholy. Blondine busied herself with lessons and walks, the quiet rhythm of her life measured in the soft steps of gazelles and the flutter of leaves in the park. Bonne-Biche, her stern yet kind guide, was a comforting presence, but their time together was limited to lessons and shared meals. Beau-Minon, ever faithful, followed her tirelessly, yet his silence made him little more than a shadow of companionship. The gazelles, though diligent in their care, lacked the warmth of spoken words. Blondine often found solace in the paths of the park, where Beau-Minon guided her to secluded corners filled with rare blossoms and dappled light. Still, her heart grew restless. Beyond the park's boundaries lay the forest, a tantalizing world of verdant mysteries. Its lofty trees seemed to whisper secrets, and the vibrant birds flitting through its depths seemed to call her name. From a small pavilion perched near the edge of the park, Blondine gazed out longingly, her thoughts heavy with questions. "Why?" she often murmured. "Why does Bonne-Biche forbid me to explore such beauty? What peril could possibly lurk in such a paradise?" Her questions went unanswered. Bonne-Biche, when asked, would sigh deeply, her brow furrowed with unease. "The forest is not what it seems, Blondine," she would say. "Promise me, child, never to set foot there. It is a place of danger, not delight." Beau-Minon, attuned to her thoughts, would meow plaintively and tug at her robe whenever she lingered too long by the pavilion. Blondine would smile and follow him back into the familiar paths of the park, yet the forest allure remained a constant ache in her heart. Months passed, the sameness of her days amplifying the loneliness she tried to suppress. Memories of her father haunted her, and though she rarely spoke of him, his absence was a wound that would not heal. Bonne-Biche and Beau-Minon, sensing her sorrow, shared her grief in their own ways. Bonne-Biche shied often, while Beau-Minon's gentle paws and mournful eyes seemed to offer silent comfort. One morning, while Blondine sat alone, lost in thought, a sudden tapping on her window startled her. She turned to see a parrot perched there, its emerald feathers shimmering in the sunlight, its throat and breast aflame with a vivid orange hue. Curious, Blondine opened the window, and to her astonishment the parrot spoke. "Good day, Blondine," it said in a voice sharp and lively. "I've come to keep you company. You must be terribly bored with only beasts and silence for companions." Blondine's eyes widened. "You can speak? How extraordinary! But you must not say such things. Bonne-Biche and Beau-Minon are very kind to me." The parrot tilted its head and replied, "Kind, perhaps, but their care comes with chains. You cannot deny that you long for more than this cage, no matter how gilded. But hush! You must promise not to tell them of my visit, or I shall never return." Blondine hesitated, surprised by the bird's insistence. "Why must I hide your presence? Bonne-Biche would never harm anyone." "Ah, you do not know them as I do," the parrot said with a knowing gleam in its eye. "Promise me, or I must leave." Reluctantly, Blondine agreed, and the parrot began to talk, filling the air with lively chatter. It flattered her beauty, praised her wit, and painted vivid pictures of the world beyond the park. Blondine, starved for such conversation, found herself captivated. When the parrot left, it promised to return, and true to its word, it came back each day, weaving tales and feeding her curiosity. One morning the parrot brought news that quickened her heart. "Blondine, I have seen your father," it cried. Blondine clasped her hands to her chest. "Tell me, how is he? What does he do? Does he still remember me?" "Your father grieves for you every day," the parrot said. "He dreams of the moment he can hold you in his arms again. But you, dear princess, are trapped here, a prisoner of Bonne-Biche and Beau-Minon." Blondine shook her head. "No, you are mistaken. They have cared for me, taught me, and kept me safe. They would never keep me here against my will." The parrot's sharp eyes glittered. "You are naive, my dear. They enjoy your company too much to let you go. But there is a way to escape, a talisman that can break the spell of this place. A single rose gathered by your own hand will free you." "A rose?" Blondine frowned. "But there are no roses in the park. Where can I find one?" The parrot leaned closer, its voice low and conspiratorial. "Not in the park, but beyond it. The forest holds what you seek. Ask Bonne-Biche for a rose and see how she reacts. Then you will know the truth." Before Blondine could question further, the parrot flew away, its departure as abrupt as its arrival. Moments later, Bonne-Biche entered the room, her face shadowed with worry. Blondine turned to face Bonne-Biche, whose questioning gaze pierced through her like the edge of a blade. "With whom have you been talking, Blondine?" Bonne-Biche's voice was steady, but heavy with suspicion as her eyes flickered toward the open window. "With no one, madam," Blondine replied softly, trying to mask her unease. Bonne-Biche's brow furrowed. "I am certain I heard voices in conversation." Blondine hesitated for a heartbeat before offering a weak smile. "I must have been speaking to myself." Bonne-Biche's face darkened with sadness. She said nothing more, but her silence spoke volumes as a single tear escaped her eye and traced a glistening path down her cheek. Blondine felt the weight of the moment, but quickly pushed it aside. Her mind churned with the parrot's words, the seeds of doubt it had sown taking root. She began to see the kindness of Bonne-Biche and Beau-Minon in a starkly different light. She thought of the power Bonne-Biche must wield, a hind who could speak, teach, tame wild creatures, and weave enchantments. What kind of being could lull a child into 7 years of slumber and then devote her life to raising and educating that same child? Surely, Blondine reasoned, such devotion was unnatural. Her thoughts turned to the parrot, its flattery a balm to her wounded pride. She clung to its promises, trusting its honeyed words without considering its motives. Later that day, with calculated curiosity, Blondine approached Bonne-Biche as they wandered among the flowers. "Why, madam," she began, her tone light and innocent, "do I not see among your flowers the most lovely and charming of all, the fragrant rose?" Bonne-Biche stopped in her tracks. A shadow crossed her face, and her voice trembled as she replied, "Blondine! Blondine, do not ask for this most perfidious flower which wounds all who touch it. Never speak to me of the rose again, child. You cannot know the danger it holds for you." Her severity left Blondine silent, though her heart churned with conflicting emotions. The rest of the day passed in a gloomy haze. Bonne-Biche's usual warmth seemed clouded with sorrow, and even Beau-Minon prowled the halls with a mournful air. Early the next morning, Blondine hurried to her window. The parrot was waiting, its vibrant plumage shimmering in the pale dawn light. The moment she opened the window, it flew in and perched on the sill. "Well, my dear Blondine," the parrot said, its voice sharp with triumph, "did you notice Bonne-Biche's reaction when you mentioned the rose? Her agitation speaks volumes. Are you ready to learn how to obtain one for yourself?" Blondine nodded hesitantly. "But how can I leave the park? Beau-Minon follows me everywhere." The parrot fluttered its wings. "You must find a way to get rid of him. If not, go in spite of him. The rose is not far, an hour's walk, no more. Bonne-Biche has kept you secluded here to prevent you from finding it. But I will guide you to a garden where the most beautiful rose in the world awaits." Blondine's heart raced. Why would she want to keep me here? Surely she could find greater joy than keeping me captive. "All will be revealed in time, Princess," the parrot replied. "When you hold the rose and are reunited with your father, the truth will become clear. Be firm. After breakfast, slip away and meet me at the edge of the forest. Your destiny awaits." Blondine agreed, closing the window just as Bonne-Biche's familiar steps echoed down the hall. After breakfast, Blondine strolled through the garden as was her habit. Beau-Minon followed faithfully, his wide eyes watching her every move. She stopped at the path leading out of the park and turned to him. "I wish to be alone," she said sternly. "Go back, Beau-Minon." The cat tilted his head, uncomprehending, and took a step closer. Blondine's patience snapped. "Go," she commanded, her voice harsh. When Beau-Minon still did not retreat, Blondine's frustration boiled over. She lashed out with her foot, striking him. The cat yowled in pain and fled, his cry echoing through the trees. Blondine hesitated, guilt pricking at her heart, but she swallowed the feeling and pressed on. She reached the gate to the forest, her hands trembling as she pushed it open. The parrot appeared almost instantly, alighting on a nearby branch. "Courage, Blondine," it chirped. "In an hour you will hold the rose and be free." Encouraged by the parrot's words, Blondine followed it into the forest. At first the woods were as enchanting as they had appeared from afar, with sunlight streaming through the canopy and birdsong filling the air. But as they pressed deeper, the landscape grew wild and unwelcoming. Thorny brambles clawed at Blondine's arms, and the once soft path became tangled with roots and sharp stones. The songs of birds gave way to an eerie silence, broken only by the crunch of her footsteps and the parrot's urgent cries. "Quickly, Blondine," the parrot urged. "Time is running out. If Bonne-Biche discovers your absence, all will be lost." Blondine's breath came in ragged gasps. Her shoes were in tatters, and her dress was torn. Just as despair threatened to overtake her, the parrot cried, "We are here! Look ahead. That is the enclosure. Beyond it lies the rose." Blondine squinted through the dense underbrush and saw the faint outline of a garden wall draped in shadow. The path twisted sharply, and Blondine found herself standing before a strange, barren enclosure. Its gate, rusted and ancient, swung open with an eerie creak as the parrot flapped its wings and beckoned her inside. The soil was lifeless, dry, and cracked, devoid of the lush greenery that had surrounded her journey thus far. Yet in the midst of this desolation stood a magnificent rose bush, its thorns sharp as daggers and its leaves dark as emerald. At its center bloomed a single rose, unlike any Blondine had ever seen, radiant and majestic, its petals a fiery red tinged with gold, shimmering as if lit from within. "Take it, Blondine," the parrot urged, its voice a mix of triumph and persuasion. "You deserve it. You have truly earned this prize." Blondine hesitated for only a moment, then reached for the rose. Her fingers trembled as they brushed the thorny branch. Pain shot through her hands as the sharp thorns pierced her skin, leaving crimson drops on the pale bark. But she did not falter. With a sharp tug, she tore the rose from the bush. No sooner had she clasped the flower tightly than a burst of cold, cruel laughter echoed through the barren enclosure. The sound froze Blondine in place. The rose fell from her grasp, and as it tumbled to the ground, it spoke in a voice both mocking and malevolent. "Thank you, Blondine," it sneered, its petals curling as if in delight. "You have freed me from the prison in which Bonne-Biche held me captive. I am your evil genius. From this moment forward you belong to me." Before Blondine could comprehend the horror of the words, the parrot cackled wickedly. "Ah, Blondine, you've done it. Thanks to you, I can now shed this guise and reclaim my true form. I am a magician, and your foolishness has destroyed your so-called friends. Bonne-Biche and Beau-Minon are no more, for I am their mortal enemy." The parrot and the rose disappeared in a whirl of darkness, leaving Blondine utterly alone. For a moment she stood frozen, unable to move or think. Then the weight of her actions crashed down upon her, and she sank to her knees. Her hands, still bleeding from the rose's thorns, clutched at the lifeless earth. Her mind reeled with guilt. How could she have betrayed Bonne-Biche and Beau-Minon, who had devoted 7 years of their lives to her care and education? Their kindness, their patience, they had been her only family. Would they ever forgive her, if they even lived? And what had the parrot meant when it said she had caused their destruction? Desperation overtook her, and she rose unsteadily to her feet, determined to return to the castle. She plunged back into the forest, pushing through brambles and thorns that tore at her skin and clothing. Her journey was grueling, the hours stretching into an eternity of pain and regret. Finally, she emerged onto the familiar grounds of Bonne-Biche's domain, or what remained of it. Where the magnificent castle had once stood, there was now only ruin. The gardens, once alive with vibrant flowers and graceful trees, were reduced to a wasteland of nettles, thistles, and twisted brambles. Blondine's heart shattered at the sight. Trembling, she stepped into the desolation, hoping against hope to find some trace of her friends. A large, grotesque toad emerged from a pile of crumbled stones and blocked her path, its bulging eyes fixed on her with disdain. "What are you seeking here, ingrate?" it croaked. "You have brought ruin upon those who loved you. Your presence insults their memory. Begone!" Blondine collapsed to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. "My poor friends," she cried. "Bonne-Biche, Beau-Minon. If only my death could atone for the pain I've caused you." Her sorrow was so profound that she hardly felt the sharp nettles beneath her as they pricked her tender skin. She wept for hours, her tears soaking the barren earth. At last she lifted her head and looked around, searching for any shelter in the midst of the destruction. "Let the wild beasts devour me," she whispered brokenly. "Let me die here on the graves of Bonne-Biche and Beau-Minon, and perhaps my suffering will honor their memory." As her words faded into the stillness, a soft voice broke through her despair. "True repentance can atone for even the gravest of sins." Blondine's head snapped up, but she saw no one. Her eyes caught only the fleeting shadow of a great black crow as it soared overhead. "Alas," she murmured, "repentance cannot bring back my dear friends. My sorrow is nothing compared to their loss." "Courage, Blondine!" the voice urged again. "Courage and hope." Blondine struggled to her feet, her body trembling with exhaustion. She stumbled along a narrow path where tall trees shielded her from the harsh sun. Their roots had pushed aside the brambles, and the ground beneath her feet was soft with moss. At the base of a great oak she collapsed, her tears flowing anew. Another voice, gentle yet firm, spoke from nearby. "Courage, Blondine, do not lose hope. Startled, Blondine turned and saw a small frog gazing at her with kind, understanding eyes. "Oh, frog," she said, her voice breaking, "what will become of me? I am alone and undeserving of any kindness." "Courage and hope," the frog repeated softly. Blondine closed her eyes, her body racked with hunger and thirst. When she opened them again, the soft tinkling of bells drew her attention. A beautiful cow with a sleek white coat approached, a silver porringer hanging from a golden chain around its neck. Blondine's heart swelled with gratitude as the cow knelt before her, offering its milk. She drank deeply, savoring the sweetness that seemed to soothe not just her body but her soul. She replaced the porringer, then pressed a tender kiss to the cow's neck. "Thank you, Blanchette," she said softly. "Perhaps my dear friends in another world can see my repentance and have sent you to comfort me." Blondine spent the night crafting a makeshift shelter among the trees. She wove branches together to create walls and lined the floor with soft moss. Exhausted from her grief and the day's trials, she lay down on her humble bed. As her eyes fluttered closed, a gentle breeze seemed to whisper through the forest, "True repentance will light your path." As the last vestiges of daylight waned, a gentle voice broke through the depths of Blondine's despair. It was a voice soft and soothing, as if the very earth itself spoke to her in her agony. "A true repentance will obtain pardon for all faults," it whispered, its tone warm with compassion. Blondine's heart, already heavy with sorrow, sank further. She trembled beneath the weight of her grief, feeling the abyss of her own actions opening wide before her. Her voice, choked with emotion, trembled as she responded, "Ah! Years of sorrow and weeping for my crimes would not suffice. I can never pardon myself." The words hung in the air, an echo of her self-loathing. In the distance, a low rumble of thunder warned of the night that was swiftly approaching. The sky darkened, its hue deepening into a brooding indigo, the air growing thick with the scent of rain and the eerie silence that only the wild could bring. Despite the crushing weight of her repentance, Blondine knew she could not simply surrender to her grief. She must survive. The wild beasts of the forest were gathering, their roars echoing in the distance, and she was utterly alone. As she moved through the dense undergrowth, her eyes caught sight of something that promised at least a semblance of safety. A small makeshift hut, its walls formed by the intertwining branches of trees that had grown together over the years. She ducked her head and slipped inside, the smell of damp earth and leaves filling her nostrils. In her exhaustion, she could scarcely keep her eyes open, but she knew she must act quickly. Her fingers, stiff from grief and fatigue, worked mechanically to secure the fragile structure, weaving more branches into the gaps and reinforcing the walls. She gathered moss and leaves, creating a bed as soft as she could manage in her state. When the shelter was finished, she covered the entrance with a pile of broken branches and leaves, creating a barrier between herself and the wilderness that loomed just outside. Blondine lay down on her bed of moss, but sleep would not come easily. Her thoughts were a tempest of self-recrimination and sorrow, and she cried herself into an uneasy slumber, her body aching from both physical labor and emotional pain. When she awoke, the first rays of dawn crept through the cracks in the branches, and for a long moment she could not make sense of where she was. But then the cruel truth settled over her like a shroud. The forest was her prison now, and there would be no escape from the ruin she had wrought. Her hands trembled as she wiped away the tear-streaked dirt from her face, her heart breaking anew. She began to weep once more, her cries echoing into the silent forest. Blondine's stomach rumbled with hunger, a cruel reminder of her isolation. She could scarcely bear the thought of foraging for food. Yet, as she sat in the stillness, the soft sound of cowbells reached her ears, faint at first but growing louder. She lifted her head, hope flickering in her chest. A moment later, Blanchette, the gentle cow, appeared before her, as if summoned by some unseen force. With a soft move, Blanchette approached and lowered her head, presenting the silver porringer hanging from her neck. the golden chain gleaming in the morning light. Blondine, trembling with gratitude, untied the chain and took the porringer. She drank deeply of the sweet milk, the warmth of it soothing her hunger and her soul. When she had finished, she replaced the porringer, pressing a kiss to Blanchette's neck. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I will always remember your kindness." Blondine knew that this gift was a small blessing, one that would sustain her for the time being. And so, every day without fail, Blanchette came, morning, midday, and evening, offering Blondine her humble meal. The cow became her only companion in the vast wilderness, a quiet symbol of the fragile hope that still remained in the princess's heart. Yet, even with the physical sustenance, Blondine could not quell the sorrow that gripped her every waking moment. Day after day she sat in the small hut, lost in her grief and self-reproach. "By my unpardonable disobedience," she would whisper to herself, "I have caused the most terrible misfortunes, which it is not in my power to repair. I have lost not only my good and true friends, but I have lost the only means of finding my father, my poor father, who perhaps still waits for his Blondine. My most unhappy Blondine, condemned to live and die alone in this frightful forest where my evil genius reigns supreme." Her words, though soft, were a lamentation that echoed through the empty forest, but there was no answer, no comforting voice, no sign of forgiveness. Blondine sought to occupy her hands and mind to stave off the crushing weight of her sorrow. Her little home, though humble, was meticulously arranged. She gathered fresh moss and leaves each day to refresh her bed, making sure it was as soft as she could manage. She tied branches together to fashion a small seat, and with the thorns that grew nearby she fashioned needles and pins, using them to mend the rips in her shoes. She even twisted some hemp she had found into thread, allowing her to fix the tattered garments that clung to her fragile frame. For 6 months, Blondine endured this life, her days marked only by the passing of time, each one blending seamlessly into the next. Her grief remained unchanged, a constant companion, but it was not the solitude that weighed on her soul. It was a genuine remorse for the fate she had brought upon those she loved. She would willingly have traded her life for a chance to undo her wrongs, to restore the lives of Bonne-Biche and Beau-Minon. But there was no undoing the damage. There was no reversing the path she had chosen, no matter how deep her sorrow or how bitter her repentance. Her life had become a slow, unyielding penance, and though the forest around her was wild and untamed, it was nothing compared to the wilderness inside her heart. Blondine sat in solitude at the entrance of her humble hut, the soft rustling of leaves the only sound to break the stillness. She gazed out into the forest, lost in thoughts of her lost friends, Bonne-Biche and Beau-Minon, and of her father, whose fate was uncertain. Her heart ached with regret for the calamity she believed she had caused them, and the weight of her sorrow felt unbearable. Suddenly a large shape emerged from the shadows of the trees, its movements slow but steady. At first Blondine thought it might be some trick of the light, but as it grew nearer, she realized it was a massive tortoise, its shell gleaming under the sun. With deliberate movements, the tortoise made its way toward her, its wise, ancient eyes meeting hers. "Blondine," said the tortoise in a deep, resonant voice, "if you place yourself under my protection, I will guide you out of this forest." Blondine looked up in surprise, but the heaviness in her heart made her slow to respond. "Why should I leave the forest, Madam Tortoise? Here I caused the death of my dear friends. Here I wish to remain, lost in my grief." The tortoise regarded her with a soft, steady gaze. "Are you so certain of their death, Blondine?" Her heart twisted. "What do you mean? I saw the ruins of their castle, the remnants of their lives. The parrot and the toad told me they were gone. You are kind, madam, but I do not hope to see them again. If they were alive, they would not have abandoned me, left me to carry the weight of their death." The tortoise paused, considering her words. "But how can you be sure, Blondine, that they are lost? They may have been taken by a power greater than their own. You know, true repentance can bring redemption even for the most tragic of mistakes. Blondine's chest tightened at the thought. Could it be possible? Could they still live? She shook her head. I have caused their downfall with my own actions. If they still live, if there is any hope of reuniting with them, please tell me. I would give anything to see them again. The tortoise's expression grew more somber. Blondine, I am forbidden to reveal their fate directly, but if you have the courage to ride upon my back for 6 months, without speaking a word or asking a question during the journey, I will take you to a place where all will be revealed. Blondine hesitated, her heart heavy with uncertainty, but her longing to know what had become of her friends outweighed her doubts. I will do it, Madam Tortoise. I promise to follow your instructions. The tortoise nodded solemnly. Remember, Blondine, 6 months without speaking or descending from my back? If you do not complete this journey, you will fall under the power of those who seek to control you, and I will be unable to help you further. Blondine's heart burned with a mixture of fear and hope. Let us begin, Madam Tortoise. I would rather endure any hardship than remain in this uncertainty. Very well, the tortoise said, and with a slow but purposeful motion it began to move, carrying Blondine deep into the heart of the forest. Now, silence, it intoned. Not a word until I speak to you again. For 3 months they traveled through the dense, shadowy woods. Blondine's mind was a tumult of emotions, but she kept her vow of silence, enduring the slow, steady rhythm of the tortoise's movements. The forest seemed endless, a labyrinth of towering trees and thick underbrush that seemed to close in on them. The journey felt both endless and oppressive, the weight of her thoughts pressing on her spirit. After what seemed like an eternity, the trees began to thin and the landscape transformed. They emerged into a wide, barren plain. The earth cracked and dry beneath them. The sun beat down harshly, but Blondine did not dare speak, her promise to the tortoise still binding her. For 6 weeks they crossed this desolate land, and then, at last, a shape appeared on the horizon, a castle. It stood in stark contrast to the emptiness of the plain, its towering spires reaching into the sky. Blondine's heart surged with anticipation. Could this be where she would find the answers she so desperately sought? Still, the tortoise moved at its deliberate pace, and though the castle grew nearer, they did not reach it quickly. The journey stretched on for 24 more days, each one feeling like an eternity to Blondine. Her thoughts burned with questions, but she remembered her vow, and not a word passed her lips. Finally, the tortoise stopped. Now, Blondine, it said, its voice heavy with finality, you have completed your journey. Descend. The answers you seek await you inside. Blondine carefully dismounted, her limbs stiff and sore from months of immobility. She hesitated only for a moment before walking toward the castle's entrance, her heart racing with hope and fear. As she stepped inside, she was met by a young woman dressed in white, whose calm presence seemed to soothe her nerves. I wish to see the fairy bienveillante, Blondine said, her voice trembling. Please tell her that Princess Blondine begs to speak with her. The young woman smiled gently. Follow me, Princess, she said, and led Blondine through a series of beautiful rooms, each more elegant than the last. They passed other young women dressed in white, who looked at Blondine with kind eyes as if they recognized her. At last they arrived at a room that seemed strangely familiar. The sight of it brought a flood of memories rushing back to Blondine, memories of her time with Bonne-Biche in the Forest of Lilacs. Her gaze fell upon a wardrobe exquisitely carved from gold and ivory. Something about it called to her, and she found herself unable to look away. Before she could approach it, the door opened and a beautiful, regal woman entered the room. Her presence was both calming and commanding, and her voice was soft but filled with authority. What do you wish, my child? She asked, her eyes full of understanding. Blondine fell to her knees. overcome with emotion. "Oh, madam," she cried, "I have been told you can give me news of my dear friends, Bonne-Biche and Beau-Minon. I believed them to be dead, and I wept for them, blaming myself for their loss. But the tortoise who guided me here has given me hope. Please, tell me, do they still live? Is there a chance that I might one day see them again?" The fairy's expression softened, and she placed a gentle hand on Blondine's shoulder. "Blondine, you are about to learn the fate of your friends. But no matter what you see, do not lose heart, do not lose hope." The fairy gestured toward the wardrobe. "This is the key. Open it and be brave." Blondine's hand shook as she took the golden key. With a trembling heart, she unlocked the wardrobe and slowly opened the doors. The sight that met her eyes was unbearable. The skins of Bonne-Biche and Beau-Minon cruelly displayed, their forms immobile as if frozen in time. Blondine's scream pierced the silence, and she collapsed, overwhelmed by grief and horror. As she fell to the floor, the sound of approaching footsteps filled the room. A young prince, his face filled with sympathy and concern, rushed to her side. "Oh, my mother," he said, his voice full of anguish, "this is too much for her." The fairy nodded, her expression grave. "It was necessary, my son. This final trial was required to free her from the curse that bound her to the Forest of Lilacs." The air in the enchanted forest was thick with magic, the trees whispering softly in the wind as if they knew the weight of the moment that had arrived. In the midst of this forest, where shadows and light danced together, the fairy Benin-Beaujour stood over the broken form of Blondine, her wand glowing softly with a golden light. With a single touch, the magic coursed through Blondine's still form, and she gasped, her chest rising with a sudden breath, as if the very life had returned to her. But her eyes, red with tears, were clouded with despair. She pushed herself up, trembling, her sobs racking her body, and cried out in a voice that echoed the pain of her heart. "Let me end it at once. Life is odious to me. There is no hope, no happiness left. I am nothing but a shadow of what I once was. My friends, my beloved friends, I will join you soon in the land of shadows." Benin-Beaujour knelt beside her, her arms gently wrapping around the sorrow-stricken princess. "Blondine, my dear, dear child," she said, her voice full of tenderness, "your friends still live, and they love you with all their hearts. You are not alone. I am Bonne-Biche, and this is my son, Beau-Minon." She paused, her gaze darkening with sorrow. "The wicked spirit of the Forest of Lilacs, taking advantage of my son's moment of carelessness, twisted our fates and cast us into strange forms, binding us to this world as you have known us. But now, at last, we are free." Blondine's tear-streaked face was filled with confusion and disbelief. "How can this be? What of my friends? Where are they? What has happened to them?" Bonne-Biche sighed deeply, her eyes softening as she spoke. "We could not resume our true forms until the rose, the object of the evil genius's power, was freed. I knew what danger it posed, yet I kept it hidden, as far from you as possible, knowing the peril it would bring should you ever release it. But alas, the parrot tricked you, and all our warnings were in vain. My son and I, though, would have remained in our animal forms forever, me a red deer, and him a humble cat. If it would have spared you the agony of what you have suffered, we have watched helplessly, as you endured endless sorrow." Blondine's heart throbbed with the realization of all that had happened beyond her understanding, but she pressed her face against the fairy's chest in an embrace, overwhelmed by the emotion of it all. "But what of the gazelles, the kind ones who served me so faithfully, with such grace?" Bonne-Biche smiled softly, her voice warm with love. "The gazelles, dear child, are the young women who accompanied you. They too were transformed when the evil spirit seized control of us. And the white cow that brought you your milk each day, her spirit too was part of our service to you, as was the wise crow who offered his words of encouragement." Blondine's eyes widened in disbelief. "And the tortoise, the faithful creature who guided me on my journey?" "Yes, Blondine," the fairy replied. It was the queen of the fairies who, seeing your deep sorrow and repentance, freed us from the spirit's power. But it came at a cost. The queen decreed that you must suffer the torment of believing my son and I had perished. To prove your loyalty and your strength of heart, though I begged and pleaded with the queen to spare you this last agony, she was unyielding. But all this pain and suffering has not been in vain. It was your endurance, your journey, that led to this moment of redemption. Blondine trembled as the weight of these revelations settled within her heart. She clung tightly to the fairy, the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. She glanced around, searching for the faces of those she had feared lost forever. Her father's face appeared to her in a sudden flash, an image of warmth and love, now distant but never forgotten. Her chest tightened with the longing to see him again. The Prince, Parfait, watching from where he knelt, sensed her yearning. His voice was soft but firm as he spoke to Benin-Beaujour. Mother, it is time. Blondine longs to see her father again. I have spoken with him. He knows she is coming. In an instant, Blondine felt herself lifted from the ground, the world around her shifting. She found herself seated in a chariot of gold and pearls so brilliant that it seemed to catch the very light of the stars themselves. Beside her, the fairy Benin-Beaujour sat, her presence a comforting warmth, while at her feet, Prince Parfait, gentle and kind, regarded her with eyes full of compassion. The chariot was drawn by 4 swans, their wings gleaming with an ethereal light as they soared through the skies with such speed that it felt as though the very air itself was lifting them. In mere moments the chariot landed before the palace of King Benin. The court had gathered, all eager to welcome the long-lost princess. When the chariot appeared, the crowd erupted in joyous cries, their voices echoing through the palace grounds. The swans, momentarily startled by the sudden outpouring of emotion, faltered in their flight, but Prince Parfait steadied them, guiding them to a perfect landing at the base of the grand staircase. King Benin, the ruler of the land, rushed forward, his face radiant with anticipation and joy. Blondine, heart racing, leapt from the chariot and into his arms. The two of them stood there, embraced in a moment of pure bliss, their tears mingling as they wept for the lost years now returned to them. When they finally pulled away, King Benin, his voice thick with emotion, kissed the hand of the fairy who had protected and guided his daughter through her trials. He turned then to Prince Parfait, embracing him with deep gratitude, the warmth of the moment flowing between them. You have returned my daughter to me, and for that I will be forever grateful. The celebrations that followed were nothing short of magnificent. For 8 days the kingdom rejoiced in the return of Blondine, their beloved princess, and every moment was filled with laughter and music, with food and drink shared among friends and family. But as the last day of the grand festival arrived, Benin-Beaujour spoke once more, her voice tinged with sadness. My work here is done, she said. It is time for me to return to my home. Blondine and Prince Parfait, their hearts heavy with the thought of separation, shared a look that spoke volumes. King Benin, ever wise and loving, took their hands in his. You will not leave, he said firmly. This place is now your home, and you shall never be parted again. And so it was. The fairy Benin-Beaujour, now beloved and honored in the kingdom, married King Benin, and Blondine became the wife of Prince Parfait, the same kind-hearted prince who had once been her savior in the Forest of Lilacs. Together, they built a life of peace, joy, and love. Blondine bore him children, daughters who mirrored her own beauty and sons who embodied the strength and nobility of their father. And as the years passed, the kingdom flourished, a place where happiness and harmony reigned. Brunette, whose heart had been softened by her own trials, often visited Blondine, and together they shared stories of their journeys. Prince Violent, too, had become more gentle, his harshness fading as Brunette's kindness transformed him. And they too found happiness, Their lives intertwined with Blondine's in the tapestry of love and redemption that wove through their world. Blondine, who had once been lost in despair, now knew only peace and contentment, surrounded by those who loved her. And as the years passed, the story of her life, filled with trials and triumphs, was told again and again, an eternal reminder that even in the darkest of times, love and hope can prevail. And so they lived, happy, beloved, and forever cherished.